Hey guys, Tom here again from synthhacker.com. In this video, we're going to be covering quite an aggressive style of bass sound used by artists like Golden Features, REZZ, and of course also Justice. To demonstrate this sound, I recreated part of the track Runner by Golden Features, so we'll listen to that now and then we'll start covering how to best approach these types of sounds. I'll quickly just say a big thank you to Splice for sponsoring this video. I'm a huge fan of Splice, and the ability to browse and download samples individually has saved me countless hours of time when working on music and tutorials. If you click the link in the description below, you can check out the custom collection I've created containing punchy drums I think are perfect for this style of music. After signing up, you'll be able to check out the millions of samples and presets to see if there's something in there for you. So again, to sign up for a free trial, simply click the link in the description below. Thanks in advance for checking that out, and thanks to Splice for supporting the channel. Now back to the video. So we're going to start off with just a blank patch inside Serum. We're just going to set up two simple saw wave oscillators with oscillator B pitched down an octave. To add a little width, we're also just going to add a couple voices of unison to oscillator A. And then to fill out the frequency range a bit, our last layer is just going to be a little bit of noise from the noise oscillator. As you can tell, the basis for this sound is actually very simple. Most of what gives these types of sounds their character is the processing later on in the signal chain. We've gone with saw waves because they're very harmonically rich, so when we add things like distortion later on, there's more for us to work with. Because we want this bass sound to be completely present in the mix while the note is held down, we're going to keep the sustain relatively high, and we're also going to make sure there's very little release so that the sound stops as soon as the note ends. One thing you might have noticed in the demo is that as well as the long sustained notes in the bass MIDI, there was also some short choppy notes. Musically, the goal of this is to emulate the funky percussive bass slaps utilized by real bass players. One approach to this would be to simply bounce the bass out to audio and then sequence the bass chops in audio form. For this sound, however, we're going to look at how to use an envelope to add the percussive element we're after. To achieve this, we're just going to set up a very short envelope and envelope 2 with a quick attack, no sustain or release, and a very short decay. We're also just going to adjust the envelope curve to make it even sharper, and then if we dive into our global modulation panel, we can set this up to modulate the global pitch within Serum. To make this effect even more pronounced, we're going to set up a comb filter, increasing the high pass frequency, cutoff, and resonance parameters, and then modulating the cutoff and resonance using the same envelope. The final thing I did in the filter was just to push the drive up a little bit to start adding some saturation to the sound, and then tame the effect of the filter overall by dialing back the mix amount. So now we have a harmonically rich starting point, we can really start diving into the processing, which is where we can start to shape the sound a little more. Our first effects are going to be within Serum itself, starting with some diode distortion, with the drive just over halfway and quite a high mix amount. There's no rules on what type of distortion to use. It really just comes down to personal preference and experimentation for the sound you're working with. A good technique to bring out some of the finer details the distortion is having on the sound is to follow this up with some multiband compression. We're going to keep most of the parameters at their default position, but we're going to slightly increase the gain, and then we can dial in the amount using our mix parameter. If the result is a little bit too harsh, you can also optionally add a subtle 6 or 12 dB low pass filter to the end of the chain. Even if the cutoff is all the way to the top, there will still be some frequency attenuation taking place, and you can dial this in further with the mix amount. Finally, one other cool trick to add some interesting harmonics is to add an EQ frequency peak before your distortion in the signal chain. If we move this peak through the frequency spectrum, we'll end up with different harmonic results. We can even use the envelope we set up earlier to modulate the frequency position to add some movement and even more of the percussive element to the start of the sound. With our synth all set up, we can now move on to stacking some external effects to really start driving the sound. Now, back in 2017, I was lucky enough to see Justice's live show at Glastonbury Music Festival, and one of the main takeaways from the experience was that although Justice's music and live act is pretty much 100% electronic, it's very clear that they have some heavy rock influences, and this definitely reflects in their sound design. A really useful technique for achieving this kind of sound is through the use of guitar cabinet emulation plugins. There's some really great third-party options out there, such as Guitar Rig from Native Instruments, Amplitube, and Bias Effects, but even Ableton's own cabinet plugin can work really well. The cabinet plugin allows you to choose the number and size of speakers being emulated, and also the type of microphone and its positioning. For this sound, I used 4 12-inch speakers with the condenser microphone with a near on-axis placement, but this is something definitely worth experimenting with. You can also play around with the dry-wet parameter to dial in the tone you want. The next plugin in our signal chain is another instance of Serum, but in effects mode. Here I used a little bit of dimension expander, some more distortion, chorus, and then another multiband compressor. At this point in our processing chain, you might be starting to notice a pattern. This is using distortion, followed by multiband compression, followed by more distortion, and so on. When it comes to mixing and designing other types of sounds, stacking plugins like this can be a bad idea, leading to messy results that are hard to mix. For driven, aggressive sounds like this though, there really aren't any rules, and experimenting with stacking effects in this way is one of the most effective ways to create the upfront, harmonically rich result we're going for. To make sure we retain some of the guitar cabinet character we might have lost after our Serum Effects plugin, I also added another cabinet device after it, with a slightly lower dry-wet setting. Finally, I just added an EQ and compressor to the end of our chain to tame some of the frequencies that were too resonant, cut off some of the low end, and sidechain the sound out of the way of the kick. To finish off, let's have a listen to our sound back in the mix. And that pretty much covers the sound. Once you've reached this point with setting up your processing chain, it can be really fun to dive back in and tweak different parameters, try out different distortion types, or even change parts of the original synth itself. One thing you can do if you're going for a REZZ type sound is bounce different versions of the same sound with different processing so you can sequence them. It's also worth mentioning that if you create a chain you really like, you can group your plugins into a rack with Command or Control G and then save it so you can pull it back up at any point in the future. So I hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell if you haven't done so already. And once again, a big thank you to Splice for sponsoring this video. Be sure to check out the link in the description below to get yourself a free trial of Splice sounds and to check out the collection of drums I think are perfect for this style of music. So that's all from me, guys. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.